And it's like in the movies, lahavdil, where they cut the guy's head off, comes back. They stick a knife in his stomach, comes back. Those are all deaths, so to speak. But they are only, in a sense, death. They're never annihilation. Whereas the nations of the world absolutely can be annihilated. In fact, that was this past week's Haftorah. If you paid attention to the Haftorah that we recited at the end, Achimos Kedoshim, is a little different, right? Sephardim and Ashkenazim and Teimanim have a little different. Correct. But we read, and that's the norm for our communities in Eretz Yisrael, anyway, and in America, so to speak. They have Halo b'nei Kushim atem. So that's the Navi Amos. And in the Navi Amos, he says exactly what we just said, that the difference between the nations of the world, like we spoke about Havdalah at the beginning of this year, what is the difference between Am Yisrael? What difference does it make that Hashem selected Avraham? Because he imbued us with immortality. There will always be Avram, because every Ger Tzedek will be Avram, Ben Avram Avinu. And the Zechus Avos will continue unabated to whatever extent we could be Zoche. Okay, 1177. He says, yeah. So Hashem asked the question, why are you special to me more than the Kushim, the people from Ethiopia? Right? 1177. Yeah. So he said, oh boy. Ugh. It's so yeah, here we are. Okay, Amos Perek Tes 7 through 15. Okay? He says, why are they different than the Ethiopians? Right? So he answers the question. And says, Ephes kilo ahashmeid ashmidis beis Yaacov nu'um Hashem. I will never utterly destroy the house of Yaakov. That's the difference. That's precise, right? Because even though hine anochi mitzaveh, I'm going to give the command, v'hane osi, I'm going to scatter the Jewish people, b'chol hagoyim, as Beis Yisrael, kasher yinoa b'kfara, like you shake the wheat in a sifter, jumping all over the place, v'lo yipol tzror aretz, but they're not going to fall to the ground. I'll shake them up, but we're not going to get rid of them. They'll be shaken up and not destroyed. Right? However, b'cherev yamutu kol chotei ami, the sinners of my people will die. Right? However, bayomahu akim esukas David hanafalas, Hashem will restore the house of David. So Hashem will winnow out the sinners of Am Yisrael, the non-believers of Am Yisrael, but ultimately Am Yisrael survives. Okay, so what I just want to look at with you is this. Okay, if it's true that Shabtai, Tzedek, Madai go in that order, that means that they correspond to a day of the week. And that means they correspond to one of the spheros. And that informs us because we're in the jurisdiction, so to speak. We're going through one of their hashpa'ot. Okay, so I'd like to suggest, if you go in order, that we are actually in the time period, right? In other words, in the day of the week, which is Tzedek. It's either Tzedek or Kochav. It depends whether it's forward 7 or backward 7, right? But it seems to me logical that it went backwards. Shabtai is closely associated with what? With Shabbos, right? And the Shlach Kadosh explains what each of these planets means. It's brought down in his Siddur, and I'll just take a little excerpt from here. Okay. Okay. And here. Okay, Koach Gvur Nasam Behem. He gave power. He gave power to each of these. Kochvei Lechet to do Hashem's bidding. Yitzarim Bedas Bebina V'Askel. He created them with some sort of knowledge and some sort of innate intelligence. Smeichim B'Seisam V'Sasim B'Va'am. They're happy to do Hashem's will. Okay, and so he says as follows: Da ki shiva kochvei lechet hem hachogegim be'es hamamshala kol echad ve'echad. These are who they are. Again, shevach tzedek ma'adim chama noga kochav levana. He uses the formulation that the Gemara uses, where Shabtai is the first, okay, and then comes tzedek, and then he describes what each one does. Harishon Shabtai godol min haaretz kemo shmonim chalakim. He says is 80 times as large as earth. And he describes this. By the way, he knew the size of all the planets, which is pretty good. I mean, I think by then they had ways of calculating that, but I think that's pretty. I don't know this. Did you know the size of the planets vis-a-vis the Earth? That's pretty good. It's pretty good astronomy.
The Egyptians knew how to do it.
They knew, yeah. These were the basic calculations. They said that the sun, for example, is 170 times as large as the Earth. Imagine. And so then he'll explain what each one is in charge of. So he says Shapsai is the shofet. It's the day of judgment, okay? Which means that's the end. When Shabbos is here, on B'yaya B'yomahu, that's going to be the final Shabbos, the final judgment of Hashem, okay? And then we move forward to Tzedek. So tzedek is, of course, the concept of tzaddik. Tzaddik yisod olam, which is Yosef. So based on this, if we're going backwards, that means that the first planet, the planet of Shabbos, appears first, because after all, what's the purpose of creation? He starts with begin with the end in mind. So wouldn't it make sense that of the first planet to show itself and serve Hashem would be the planet that represents Shabbos? That's Shabtai, which is the planet of restriction. Just like on Shabbos, we don't do malacha, and where there is a sense of stop, let's evaluate everything there is. And by the way, what's interesting about Saturn is different than the other planets. It has all rings around it, which is almost like that the other days are all orbiting around Shabbos, because Shabbos is really the Ikar. And then we go to Tzedek. Tzedek is the previous. Is Midah. We say Tzaddik Yisod Olam. Tzaddik is the center of the universe, but that's the Midah of Yisod. It's representing Yosef HaTzaddik. So we're actually, you can add to our picture here, is that we're in the sixth day, which corresponds to the Midah of Yisod, which corresponds to the concept of Yosef HaTzaddik, which is symbolized by the planet Tzedek, Jupiter. I'll take a couple things about Jupiter. Do you know anything about Jupiter at all? It's the biggest planet. And what is it considered in Mazel? It's considered a great benefic. It gives. Well, how does that correspond to Yosef? Or how does that correspond to the tzaddik? What does the tzaddik do? He gives brachas. A tzaddik gives brachas. And that's the symbol of that planet is the idea of bestowing bracha. Tzaddik is that job. Yosef was the mashpir. He provided parnasa. Those who follow what those planets represent understand that Jupiter is expansion or wealth. Represents wealth, expansion, success, happiness. That's what you get by associating with a tzaddik. In a little bit, I'm going to be going to a tzaddik, to daven. They're called the Zvila Rebbe. You familiar with the Zvila Rebbe? Mm. Who's been to the Zvila Rebbe? Yeah? Zvila Rebbe lived in Yerushalayim from about 1926 to 1945. He was here during the very critical year of 1942, when in the summer of 42, Ramel Yamach Shemo was knocking on the doors of Eretz Yisrael with a plan in place, together with the Mufti, the Rebbe of Arafat and Abbas, v'chahena, to literally create concentration camps and destroy every single Jew in Eretz Yisrael, which at that time numbered around 600,000 Jews. and that was going to be it. And the Zvila Rebbe led a delegation of prayer to Har HaZeisim, where I was last night, where Rabbi Hoffman is buried, to the graveyard of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. And as we had mentioned, I believe previously, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh arrived in Eretz Yisrael for just a short period of time, right around 1740, which represented the beginning of the dawn of Friday. This is Erev Shabbos, is 1740. The dawn, the first hour. A couple of great tzaddikim arrived, the Ramchal and the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, respectively, the Rebbes of the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon. Because the Orach Chaim HaKadosh was held in tremendous esteem by the Baal Shem Tov, many stories about that, and then the Vilna Gaon said about the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who's buried in Tveria, he says, if I would have known that he was here in Italy, I would have crawled, I would have walked on foot from Vilna to Italy, no small walk, to sit by his feet and learn Torah. So they were here, those great tzaddikim, and that began a period of resurgence for Eretz Yisrael, really. And you had communities really take root in Tveria, in Tzfat, in Tveria, and then at that point already in Yerushalayim, because you remember there was the great earthquake in Tzfat, was 1739, and about which the Chassam Sofer said, yeah, too many people focusing on Tzfat, and they're happy to stay in Tzfat, but Yerushalayim it's time for Yerushalayim to be rebuilt. It's time for Yerushalayim to be rebuilt. He says that's why there was an earthquake, to move the community southward. In fact, it's fascinating, but the population of the old city really took off in 1740 when the Orach Chaim arrives, just after the earthquake, because there was no place to live in Tzfat anymore. Or they had enough of living in Tzfat, because the houses came down on their heads. So Yerushalayim, the old city of Yerushalayim, the Jewish community in the old city, started to swell the population. And that forced, within a generation, the idea that we have to begin to think about moving outside the walls, which took time, which took close to 100 years, believe it or not, but that's what was going on. It was a difficult time for the Jewish people because there were so many people coming in, and unfortunately there was not the greatest neighborly relations with the Arabs. As the population started to surge, they created a lot of problems, and they were being taken advantage of, and they were difficult times. But the concept is that tzaddikim have been given a power by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bestow blessing. Just like Kaviyachol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this concept called Tzedek, this symbolic planet, right, which represents Erev Shabbos. By the way, when you think about Erev Shabbos, there's a lot of stuff going on, buying, right? Everybody's loading up. The house is getting filled up with groceries and cooking, right? It's a great day to be in the house because there's lots of food around. Yosef the Mashpir, the everything's filling up. The ovens are filling up. The challah is being baked. The shalom is being made. It's a great day to be around. The tzaddik is the Mashpir. He's bringing us blessing. And Hashem gave that gift to the tzaddikim because Hashem loves the tzaddikim. And Hashem wants the tzaddikim to have the joy of giving, which is what Hashem's joy is. Nothing gives the tzaddik more pleasure than to bring a bracha. I was reading Matzah Shabbos, and it's always a good story. I was advised recently by a dear friend of mine who spoke to a number of Gedolim and said, there's always a problem about the Shabbos table. The Shabbos table for young people today is a big challenge. When I was a kid, about 10 years ago, you sat for 3 hours at the Shabbos table, you asked permission to remove your jacket and tie, right? You didn't go for a spatzir or to play a Monopoly game in the middle. You sat and you sang Zmiros, and you read Pirkei Avos, the whole Pirkei Avos parak of the day. It could be 24 Mishnayos, didn't matter. You went around the table. That was our Shabbos table. Today, wow, if you'll get in, you've got around 5 minutes to 10 minutes of attention span before the kids are off and running, right? You better catch them fast. My friend was saying to me, some Gedolim say, just tell stories. Tell stories of tzaddikim. Capture their imagination, because that's all you're going to be able to do. Fine. You don't have to sing the elaborate Zmiros. You don't have to, learn the whole Pirkei Avos. Tell stories of tzaddikim. That's our generation. We need the tzaddikim. So, we took out a sefer about Rameir Abu Chutzera, seeing that we're right around the corner from the big Sephardic holiday. everybody's holiday, which is Lag BaOmer, but particularly in the Sephardic communities, right? There's a enormous drive to participate in the festivities in Meron, which this year is a little problematic. You know why? Because of Shabbos. It's a big problem. I'm not up on exactly what they're preparing, but I think they delayed the main hadlaka till like 3 o'clock in the morning. What's that? Oh, only till 1:15? I guess people can jump in their cars and go. But there is this hunger to be by Shem Yochai because they believe, right? The tzaddik is going to be mashpia. The tzaddik is the where I unlock the treasure house of tzaddikim. The treasure, the tzedakah. What is tzedek? What is mazel tzedek? Tzedakah. I'm just going to give you. Whether you deserve it or not, I'll give you. You deserve it. You don't deserve it. And that's the whole thing of the chai roto, right? People are donating wine, and that's supposed to be a great segula. Anyway, so I was reading some stories about the mayor of Abuchatzeir, or the son of the Baba Sali, and he used to give brachos that were literally life and death. Literally life and death. You tell a story, for example, of many cases people came for refuahs. Just one interesting story. He says there was a boy who had terrible acne. Terrible acne. You know, he was so embarrassed. He didn't want to go out of the house. It was disfiguring. So he came, put his hand on the kid's face, he gave him something to drink, finished. The acne never came back. And many cases where there were cancers and all sorts of illnesses, or inability to walk, whatever, they came to the tzaddik, finished. And whatever was missing, whatever was chaser, became filled in. And this concept goes back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, when he comes to Eretz Yisrael, wants to build the Beis HaMikdash, right? And it says, he comes into Eretz Yisrael, and the pasuk says, "Vayikra," he builds a mizbeach where he had his dream, and it says, "Vayikra lo Kel Elokei Yisrael." He calls the mizbeach God, the God of Israel. That's an odd name for an altar, right? But Rashi brings down, he says that's not the way to read it. Vayikra lo Kel, Hashem called Yaakov Elokei Yisrael. Vayikra lo, he called Yaakov, Vayikra lo Kel, Elokei Yisrael. Meaning that Hashem called Yaakov Ki'ilu, a God. What is that about? What is that all about? Because he bestowed upon Yaakov Avinu the gift of being God-like. And what does God do? But provide shefa and parnasa. So actually, if you think about it, the first day of the week, because Shabbos is Shabbos, it's both an end point and a starting point. But when we get into the week, the first day of the week is tzedek, going backwards. The Yom HaShishi, right? We are actually experiencing that. So part of what we learn and what we understand is that the big job in our generation, and to get through this period, is association with tzaddikim. That's really the only way. We really have to hold on tight to our tzaddikim because we are experiencing all sorts of trials and tribulations of Chevlei Mashiach. Ups and downs, and our generation is beset with horrible challenges that we didn't really see before in terms of chinuch, in terms of assimilation, in terms of going off the derech, in terms of shidduchim. Terrible problems with shidduchim. You know, in the United States now, if a boy marries an older girl, he gets a bonus. Did you read about this? A guy set up an organization. He pays the guy. They made it attractive to marry a girl 1 year older than you. You get like a couple $1,000. So, hey, starts looking a lot better. Becomes more makubal. People are happy when they hear a 22-year-old boy is going out with a 24-year-old girl, 23-year-old girl.
When I was still in the old country, I was friends with somebody, we had bought their house. She was in the South, her background was South. She says it's very makubal that the girls will be older because they'll have been working, and the boys are the 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, and the girls will be 22. It's going back already like 15, 20 years. Chassidim
are very smart.
Can you finish what you were saying about Sfira?
Yes. So Sfira, in terms of Sfira Sa'omer, or the Sfirot, which one are you referring to?
You were talking talking about going to this Rebbe.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying.
And I didn't understand.
Okay, so we're going to because as we are going through the project of perfecting our midos, of justifying why we were chosen. Why were we chosen? Because our chesed wasn't a chatas, wasn't a sham, wasn't a falsity, wasn't a lie. And because our chesed was true, and because our gevura of not falling into the Yetzer Hara is the positive one, is the positive gevura, as opposed to taking a knife and chopping off somebody's head because you're trying to, convey or confirm your will upon them. So we have a job during Sfira to work on why we are like deserving of Kabbalah Satorah, and that means we associate with those tzaddikim, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaacov, those shpizin. We have to emulate them. And the best way to emulate and to connect is to go to those people who were successful in emulating them, such as the Zvila Rebbe, such as Rav Meir Abba Chatzera, such as Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay, so we need that help. We desperately need help. It is our close association with the tzaddikim that literally carries us through, and that's what happened in 1942 when the Zvila Rebbe went to Har Zeisim with leading a group of people to daven by the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, who came in 1742 and started the whole ball rolling. He says, he said, I saw a light coming from the kever, which leads me to believe that that Rommel will not get here. And the reality was that he didn't. And that was truly the turning point of the war. And I'll just end with this. They just recently discovered a letter from the Abarbanel. Now the Abarbanel is important because he was the great Gadol that lived in 1492, besides being an important Meforesh, but he led the Jewish people out of Spain, into exile, but really, in a sense, they were heading back towards Eretz Yisrael. So it was an exile, but it was a positive exile in a sense, although a painful one. And he wrote that, he said this, but Kabbalah, he says, I have a Kabbalah from my fathers. You'll see the exact text, as the gist of it is, in the end of days will arise a leader from the West, the Western nations. Remember, he was from Spain. He will terrify the world with an angry war. He will conquer some nations without a shot, and some nations he'll trample underfoot until he gets to Eretz Yisrael, from where he will be stopped, right? And from there, our Yeshua will emerge. We told the exact story of our generation, where we went from 600,000 Jews teetering on the precipice of life and death, to Kanahara now, we have 6.5 million Jews in Eretz Yisrael today. That's 500,000 more than when I arrived here 5 years ago. When you think about 500,000 Jews arriving in 5 years, and when it was in the beginning of the state, a couple million Jews arriving in the space of 5 years, this is a kiyum of Esaz Semos Kanfei Nisharim V'Aviyaschem Elai. So therefore, it is the clinging to the tzaddikim is what we need to do. And that really is the message that we find that the Vilna Gaon is saying, take a look at the order of things, and you will see that this is the time period we're in. And Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zocha to the Geula Shleima b'mher v'yameinu.